Hi, for Learning Unit 11 and Learning Unit 12, we will be talking about Trade Unions Act 1959. In the year 2015, more than 900,000 Malaysian workers in the private and public sectors belonged to a trade union. While this is not a large population of the workforce, roughly 80%, the influence of unions goes beyond their membership. All workers in an establishment who are eligible to be union members receive the terms and conditions of service laid down in the agreement whether or not they are union members. Furthermore, trade unions act as a pressure group on the government pushing for the introduction of legislation and systems which will benefit workers in general. Workers in most sectors of the economy have been organized into unions. This organization has not been confined to production workers, but includes those in supervisory and management level jobs, white-collar workers, and many executives. So why do workers join trade unions? Who can join a trade union? How does a new union get itself registered? These are some of the questions to be addressed in this chapter. There are three main reasons which explains why workers form and join trade unions. The reasons are to improve the economic situation, to ensure their rights are protected, and also for social reasons. These are the revolution of labor laws and regulations in Malaysia. For trade unions, it started with Trade Unions Enactment 1940, and it was revised and renamed as Trade Unions Ordinance 1959 and then Trade Unions Act 1959, which is still being used until now. And then we have the Industrial Court Ordinance 1948 and Trade Disputes Ordinance 1949, which found their way into current law, which is the Industrial Relations Act 1967 and is still being used until now. In 1975, the Code of Conduct for Industrial Harmony was agreed upon between the then Ministry of Labour and Manpower, the Malaysian Council of Employers Organisation, and the Malaysian Trade Union Congress to lay down principles and guidelines to employers and workers on the practice of industrial relations for achieving greater industrial harmony. The labour law for trade unions in Malaysia started with the Trade Unions Enactment in 1940. The stated object in the title of this 1940 ordinance was an enactment for the registration and control of trade unions. Its declared purpose was the fostering of the right kind of responsible leadership amongst workers, and at the same time to discourage or reduce such influence as the professional agitators may have had, and to reduce the opportunities or the excuse for the activities of such persons. And then the enactment was revised to the Trade Unions Act 1959. The Trade Unions Act 1959 was enforced since 1st of July 1959 in Peninsular Malaysia as the Trade Unions Ordinance 1959. It was extended to Sabah on the 25th of March 1965 and to Sarawak on the 19th of August 1965, which was after Malaysia was formed. The Trade Unions Act was revised by the Commissioner of Law Revision in 1981 and was renamed Trade Unions Act 1959 in bracket Act 262. With this revision, it replaced the Trade Unions Ordinance 1940. Trade Unions Act 1959 seeks to control activities of trade unions so that they can develop in an orderly and peaceful manner. The Act lays down stringent statutory and procedural provisions for the formation and operations of trade unions in Malaysia. One of the institutions to enforce the Trade Unions Act 1959 in Malaysia is the Department of Trade Unions Affairs. It was formed in 1946 under the enforcement of the Trade Unions Enactment 1940. It was changed to Department of Trade Unions Affairs in 1989, and the department is headed by the Director General of Trade Union, DGTU. The Department of Trade Unions Affairs, was formerly known as the Pejabat Pendaftaran Kesatuan Sekerja, was established in July 1946. The department was to enforce the Trade Union Enactment 1940, which came into effect in 1946. Under the enactment, every union was required to apply to the registrar to register. Following negotiations between the government, employers and trade unions, the Trade Unions Ordinance 1959 came into force on July 1, 1959 to replace the Trade Unions Enactment 1940. Under this ordinance, all trade unions were required to apply to the registrar for registration. The rights to form unions in Malaysia can be referred under the Article 10 Malaysian Constitution, Employment Act 1955, Labour Ordinance Sabah, Labour Ordinance Sarawak, and also the Industrial Relations Act 1967. Trade unions must be registered with the Registrar of Trade Unions for it to be valid and legal. Apart from that, the rights to form unions in Malaysia can also be referred to the International Labour Organization, which is the ratification under the Right to Organize and Collective Bargaining Convention 98, 1949. What is a trade union? Trade union exists within any particular establishment, trade, occupation or industry, or within any similar trades, occupations or industries, and whether temporary or permanent, and having among its objects one or more of the following objects: the regulation of relations between workmen and employers for the purposes of promoting good and harmonious industrial relations between workmen and employers, improving the working conditions of workmen, or enhancing the economic and social status, or increasing productivity. The regulation of relations between workmen and workmen, or between employers and employers. The representation of either workmen or employers in trade disputes. The conducting of or dealing with trade disputes and matters related thereto, or the promotion, organization or financing of strikes or lockouts in any trade or industry, or the provision of pay or other benefits for its members during a strike or lockout. These are under Section 2 Trade Unions Act 1959. Among the conditions to trade unions registration in Malaysia include: it must be by region only, for example, Sabah, Sarawak or Peninsular Malaysia. It must be by similar trade, occupation or industry only. And then the general trade union is not allowed. It must be specific. In-house trade unions are allowed, and it is subjected to the approval of the Director General of Trade Unions. The objectives of trade union registration include: to regulate the relations between employer-employees, or employee and employee, or employer and employer. Apart from that, trade union is the representative in trade disputes, and then the objective of registration also is to conduct and manage trade disputes and the promotion or organization or financing of industrial. For the registration of trade unions, application must be made within 1 month from the date the union was registered, and it must be made at the nearest Department of Trade Unions Affairs office. It may be extended by DGTU not more than 6 months. Application must be signed by at least 7 members. using Form B in 4 copies under Regulation 4. The application must include the following: names, occupations and addresses of applicants, name and address of the trade union, titles, names, age, addresses and occupations of the officers of the trade unions. As for the trade union membership in Malaysia, the members must be employed in the specific establishment, trade, occupation or industry in respect of which the trade union is registered. The members must be aged above 16 years, but those between 16 to 21 cannot be appointed as officers or executives. As for students, they can join trade union, but they must be above 18 and is genuinely employed. For foreign workers, they cannot be appointed as officers or executives, but can be a member of trade union. Those who are eligible to be trade unions officers or executives are as follows. They must be Malaysian citizen, aged 21 and above, a member of the trade union, not an executive of any trade union which has been deregistered, cancelled or withdrawn by the Director General of Trade Union as a result of contravening the law, not an office bearer or employee of any political party, has never been convicted by any court of law for breach of trust, extortion or intimidation, and also not a bankrupt. As for being trade union employees, those who are eligible must be Malaysian citizen, has not been convicted by any court, not an officer or employee of any other trade unions, and not an office bearer or employee of a political party. And for the Director General of Trade Union, the authority are as follows. Number 1 is to register trade union. Number 2 is to reject the registration on the following grounds. When similar TU has already existed, TU may be used for unlawful purposes or against its objectives. TU objectives are unlawful, contradict the TU Act 1959 and TU Regulations 1959, having a similar name with other trade unions, and also if the trade union is unwanted. Thus, DGTU can reject the registration of the trade union. The deregistration of trade union are possible upon the following condition. Number 1, upon request from trade unions. Number 2, registration was obtained or issued by fraud or mistake. And then it can be deregistered if trade union objectives or regulations are unlawful and if there are unlawful membership or officers. Trade union can also be deregistered if it is being or is likely to be used for any unlawful purposes and has contravened Trade Union Act 1959 or Trade Union Regulations 1959. It can also be registered if there is unlawful spending on trade union fund, and also if the trade union has ceased to exist, and if there is merger of trade union, then we have the minister's authority. The minister has the authority to decide and appeal against the Director General of Trade Union decisions on registration, interpretation of trade union definition, deregistration of trade union, prohibit trade union to conduct any activities pending to deregistration, suspension of trade union branch, removal of trade union members who had been involved in unlawful industrial actions, refuse to accept the appointment of trade union officers and employees, reject trade union registration with a similar name, prohibit lockout and strike, declare secret ballot as unlawful, instruct the bank to refuse payments of any check issued by a trade union for unlawful activities, and to reject or cancel application of trade union for affiliations with external institution. The minister can also suspend the registration of a trade union if it is not exceeding 6 months. The rights and liability of trade union includes immunity against any legal actions or civil suit, including tort, whereby it must be legally registered and it must be related to trade dispute. Second, liable on any contract entered, for example, collective agreement. And the trade union also has the right to sue and to be sued. Apart from that, it can administer and manage the trade union by appointing officers, on a registered office and keeping records, develop rules on trade unions, and also the rights relating to property, investment, fund, and account management. Next, we are going to look at the matters or decisions requiring secret ballot. Number 1, election of delegates to a general meeting. Number 2, the election of officers other than trustees. Number 3, strikes or lockouts, which is valid only for 90 days. Number 4, imposition of a levy, must receive 50% of the vote. Number 5, amendments of the rules relating to fees or benefits. Number 6, dissolution of the trade union. And number 7, the amalgamation or merger with other trade unions, and must receive 60% vote. Trade union members who are under 18 years of age are not eligible to vote on matters number 3 until 6, which are the strikes or lockouts, imposition of a levy, amendment of the rules, and also dissolution of the trade union. Upon being accepted as a member of a union, a worker has to pay an entrance fee and a monthly subscription on the average between 3 ringgit Malaysia to 8 ringgit Malaysia. The use of this money is confined to purposes set out in the Trade Unions Act Section 50 and the rules of the trade union. The Act states that union funds can only be used for the stated purposes, which include the paying of expenses related to salaries for employees of the union, expenses related to the upkeep of an office, expenses related to the settlement of a trade dispute, compensation to members for losses arising out of trade disputes, allowances to members and their families on account of death, old age, sickness, accident or unemployment, expenses related to the publishing of a newsletter, and expenses related to the organization of social, sports, educational, and charitable activities of the members. Most importantly, the law prohibits unions from using their funds for any political purposes, including providing funds to a political party. It is Malaysian policy to separate as far as is practicable the trade union and the political systems. Trade union leaders are not encouraged to be active in party politics, although individuals retain their rights to participate in such activities. So to ensure that union funds are only used for the purposes allowed by the law and the union constitutions, unions are required to submit annual audited accounts to the Department of Trade Unions for checking. Failure to send in such account will, after adequate warning has been given, lead to the union being deregistered. In order for the trade union not to be running out of funds, the funds can be invested. There are few ways where the fund can be invested. Number 1 is through purchase, rent, lease, sell, exchange of any land or building. The trade union can also invest its fund in any securities or loans, or they can deposit fund in a local bank, but with permission from the minister. The trade union can also invest in registered cooperative society, and they can also invest in any commercial, industrial, or agricultural undertaking or banking enterprises. The union movement is often portrayed negatively in the media. Assistance given to members is rarely highlighted. Stories about unions cooperating with employers are rarely given coverage. Instead, bad press headlines are given to trade union movement. Unions in other countries also receive the same bad press. A report by a government official alleged that some union officials had been given cash commissions or property in return for industrial peace or withdrawing excessive demands during collective. The union movement is often portrayed negatively in the media. Assistance given to members is rarely highlighted. Stories about unions cooperating with employers are rarely given coverage. Not only in Malaysia, unions in other countries also receive the same bad press. So to survive the 21st century, unions need to clean up their act, ensure the accountability and honesty of their elected leaders, and learn to improve their public image.